The morning fog had not yet lifted over the outskirts of Springfield when 14-year-old Tyler Walker decided to cut through the abandoned buildings on the edge of town to get to school. The boy often used this path, which led past an old barn that the locals had long since abandoned after the McGregor farm went bankrupt. Usually Tyler would walk by without noticing anything unusual, but today something made him stop. The barn door was ajar, which in itself seemed strange. The teenager remembered that it had always been locked tight. Curiosity got the better of him, and he cautiously approached the building. The smell that wafted out of the semi-darkness made him wrinkle his nose. Tyler pushed the door a little harder and peered inside. What he saw was etched into his memory forever. In the corner of the shed, among old sacks and rusty tools, lay the body of a young girl. Her dark skin had taken on an unhealthy hue, and a strange red stripe was visible around her neck. Her arms were spread out as if she had been trying to grab something in the last moments of her life. Tyler recoiled, feeling nauseous. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and dialed the emergency services. The dispatcher's voice sounded distant and unreal as he tried to explain that he had found a dead girl in an old shed on Elm Street. Detective Zora Kingsley received the call at 8:23 a.m. She had just finished her second cup of coffee and was reviewing reports of petty thefts when the phone rang. Sergeant Davis's voice was tense. "We have a body, Zora." A young girl, found in an abandoned shed on the outskirts, looked suspicious. Kingsley sighed. In her 3 months in Springfield, she had grown accustomed to the fact that serious crimes were rare here. Most of her time was spent dealing with domestic violence, bicycle thefts, and random bar fights. This could be the first murder in 2 years. When she arrived at the scene, Zora immediately noticed that the local police had already cordoned off the area. A young officer named Thomas Brown, the same surname as it turned out later, was standing at the entrance to the shed, his face pale. The forensic team from the district center had not yet arrived, which gave the detective a chance to examine the scene without any fuss. "What do we have?" she asked Sergeant Davis. "A 17-year-old girl, believed to be Keshia Brown. She had her ID on her." The body was found by a local schoolboy around 7 in the morning. The boy is in shock, sitting in his car. Zora put on gloves and carefully entered the shed. The smell of decomposition was not too strong, indicating that the death was relatively recent. The girl was lying in the corner. Her jeans and pink t-shirt were crumpled but not torn. There were clear signs of strangulation on her neck. A handbag lay next to the body, its contents scattered across the floor. "Looks like a robbery gone wrong," the detective muttered, making notes in her notebook. But what was a 17-year-old girl doing here at night? She carefully examined the area around the body. The wallet was open. Several dollar bills had been taken out, but the credit cards were untouched. A cell phone lay under an old box, its screen smashed. The gold earrings in the victim's ears were still there, which Zora found strange. Usually robbers take jewelry first. An examination of the body revealed several more details. The girl's fingernails were broken, and there were abrasions on her knuckles. She had clearly struggled. At first glance, there were no signs of sexual assault, but only an autopsy could provide definitive conclusions. When the forensic experts arrived, Zora switched to questioning witnesses. Tyler Walker sat in the patrol car, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm September morning. His hands trembled as he recounted the discovery. "I was just walking to school like usual," the teenager said, avoiding looking toward the shed. "The door was open, and it's always locked. I thought maybe someone was sleeping there. Homeless people sometimes hide in places like that. And then I saw her." "Have you seen this girl before?" Zora asked. Tyler nodded. "Keshia Brown. She went to the same school, just a grade above me. She was quiet, not the party type. I don't know what she was doing there." "When was the last time you walked past that shed?" "The day before yesterday morning. Everything was normal then. The door was locked." Zora wrote down the teenager's statement and sent him home, warning him that she might need to talk to him again later. The next step was to notify the victim's family. According to the documents found in her purse, Keshia Brown lived on Maple Avenue, a few blocks from where her body was found. At number 27, the detective was met by a tall, middle-aged man with graying temples and calloused hands. "Maverick Johnson," he introduced himself. Keshia is my niece. She's been living with me since her parents died. Zora delicately broke the news of the tragedy. Maverick's reaction was immediate and furious. He slammed his fist against the doorframe, tears welling up in his eyes. No, she's just a child. Who could have done this? We're just beginning our investigation, Mr. Johnson. Tell me, when was the last time you saw your niece? Last night, around 7. She said she was going to Latosha's, her cousin. She sometimes stayed there overnight to help out around the house. I wasn't worried. Latosha is a good woman, married, lives nearby. Do you have any contact information for this Latosha? Letitia Tallis lives on Oak Street. Her husband, DeAndre, works at Jimmy's auto repair. Maverick led the detective to his car, his face contorted with grief and anger. Find that bastard, detective. Keshia was a good girl. She never hurt anyone. Whoever did this, they'll pay. Zora nodded, understanding the man's pain, but at the same time noting his words to herself. In her experience, relatives of victims often knew more than they were willing to say at first. Returning to the crime scene, she pondered the information she had received. A 17-year-old girl, described by all as quiet and calm, found dead in an abandoned shed after going to visit her cousin. The signs of a robbery were inconclusive. The money had been taken very selectively, and the jewelry had been left untouched. The forensic team was finishing up when Zora returned. Photos had been taken, samples collected, and the body was ready to be transported to the morgue. The team leader, the experienced Charlie Warren, approached the detective with his preliminary findings. Time of death is approximately between 10 p.m. and midnight, he reported. Cause of death is strangulation, most likely with a rope or cord. There are no signs of a struggle at the scene, so it appears the murder took place elsewhere and the body was brought here. Interesting, Zora muttered. So this wasn't a random robbery. Definitely not. There are too many inconsistencies. Besides, who would rob a 17-year-old girl in an abandoned shed? It looks like an attempt to hide the real motive. The detective agreed with the forensic expert's conclusions. The case promised to be more complicated than it had seemed at first glance. She would have to talk to the Tallis family and find out what really happened on the last evening of Kezia Brown's life. The sun rose higher, dispelling the morning fog, but the shadows surrounding this case only grew darker. The house on Oak Street looked well kept, despite its modest surroundings. It was a small, one-story house with faded blue paint on the walls and a neatly trimmed lawn in front of the entrance. Detective Zora Kingsley parked at the curb and watched the house for a few minutes, gathering her thoughts before talking to the Tallis family. A shadow flitted across the window. Someone had noticed her arrival. Zora got out of the car and headed for the porch. The door opened before she had a chance to knock. Standing in the doorway was a middle-aged woman, short but strongly built, with a tired face and a wary expression. "Are you a police officer?" the woman asked, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Detective Zora Kingsley. Are you Latosha Tallis?" "Yes, that's me. Please come in." Latosha led the detective into a small living room where a man in mechanic's overalls was sitting on the sofa. His dark hands were stained with engine oil, which he was trying unsuccessfully to wipe off with a damp rag. When he saw the detective, he stood up abruptly, his movements tense. "DeAndre Tallis," he said, extending his hand, but immediately pulling it back when he noticed the oil stains on his palm. "Sorry, I just got off work." Zora sat down in the chair offered to her and took out her notebook. The atmosphere in the room was tense. The couple was clearly expecting bad news. "I'm afraid I have to tell you about a tragedy. This morning, the body of your relative, Kezia Brown, was found." The reaction was immediate. Latosha gasped and pressed her hands to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. DeAndre sat back down on the couch abruptly, his face pale. "No, it can't be," Latosha whispered. "What happened? Where was she found?" "In an abandoned shed on Elm Street. We're investigating the circumstances of her death. I need to ask you a few questions." DeAndre began nervously fiddling with his cap, which was lying next to him on the sofa. His gaze darted around the room, avoiding the detective's eyes. "When was the last time you saw Kesha?" Zora asked. "Last night," Latosha replied, sobbing. "She came over around 6:30 like usual. She was helping me around the house and we were making dinner together." "And you, Mr. Tallis?" DeAndre flinched as if surprised. Me? Well, yes, I saw her. Not for long. I came home late, around 8. I had dinner and went to bed. I worked late at the auto shop. Did Kesha go home last night? Latosha shook her head. No, she sometimes stayed over. She has her own corner in the guest room. I woke up in the morning and she was gone. I thought she had left early for school, as she sometimes did. Tell me about your relationship with Kashia. How often did she visit you? She's my cousin, Latosha explained. After her parents died, she's been living with her uncle Maverick, but he works a lot and is often away. Keshia came over a lot, especially in the last few months. She helped with cooking and cleaning. She's a good girl, very obedient. Zora noticed DeAndre wince at the word obedient, but he quickly hid his reaction. And you, Mr. Tallis, how was your relationship with Keisha? Fine, he replied quickly. I mean, she's your wife's niece. She came over to help Latosha. I didn't really talk to her much. I work a lot and am rarely home. But you were home yesterday? Yes, I got home late. I ate and went straight to bed. I was very tired. The detective noticed a contradiction in his words. At first he said he saw Kesha, but now he claimed he didn't talk to her. She decided not to dwell on it for now. Did you know of any problems Kesha was having? Conflicts? Trouble at school? Or with friends? Latosha shook her head. No problems. She was a good student and planned to go to college. She dreamed of becoming a nurse. She was a very quiet girl, not the type to get into trouble. What about young men? Did she have a boyfriend? At this question, DeAndre shifted uncomfortably on the couch, his breathing quickening. Keshia was very shy, Latosha replied. I don't know of any boys. She spent more time with her family than with her peers. Mr. Tallis, what about you? What would I know about her personal life? DeAndre wiped the sweat from his forehead. She didn't share things like that with me. Zora continued to ask questions, finding out details about the family's daily life. It turned out that Kesha did spend a lot of time at the Tallis house. She had her own key and knew all the family's habits and routines. Latosha worked as a night shift cleaner at a hospital 3 times a week, and DeAndre often stayed late at the auto repair shop. So Keisha was sometimes left alone in the house? The detective asked. Not alone, Latosha corrected. If I was working, DeAndre was home, and if he was late, I was with her. And last night? I was home last night, Latosha said. I had the day off. Kesha and I cooked and talked about women's stuff. Then DeAndre came home, had dinner, and went to bed early. The detective wrote down the statement, noting DeAndre's nervousness and how he avoided details about last night. His wife, on the other hand, was open and talkative, but Zora noticed a certain tension in her grief, too demonstrative, as if she were putting on an act. The detective's phone rang. It was the coroner from the county center. Excuse me, I have to take this, Zora said and stepped out onto the porch. Kingsley speaking. Detective, I have the preliminary autopsy results. Kesha Brown was pregnant, not very far along, about 6 weeks. Zora felt a new picture forming in her head. The pregnancy of a 17-year-old girl changed everything. Anything else? The signs of strangulation have been confirmed. A rope or thick cord was used. There are no other injuries, nor any signs of sexual assault. Death was quick. Thank you. Send me the full report as soon as it's ready. Zora returned to the house. The Tallis couple sat in silence, Latosha crying quietly, DeAndre staring at the floor. I have some more information for you, said the detective. The autopsy revealed that Kesha was pregnant. The reaction was mixed. Latosha cried out and clutched her heart. No, it can't be. She was just a child. Who could have... My God, poor girl. DeAndre turned even paler, if that was possible. His hands trembled and he clenched his fists tightly. This changes everything, he whispered. How? Asked Zora. Well, it means she did have someone. Some guy. Maybe he... DeAndre didn't finish. Do you know who the father might be? No, DeAndre replied too quickly. How would I know? She didn't tell us about things like that. Latosha continued to cry, rocking back and forth on the couch. Poor thing, she was probably afraid to tell us. We would have supported her, helped her. Who was this bastard who took advantage of a child's trust? Zora watched the couple closely. Latosha looked genuinely shocked by the news of the pregnancy, but DeAndre, his reaction was too strong for someone who claimed to know the girl so little. The detective finished her questioning and asked the couple not to leave town without notifying her. As she left the house, she noticed DeAndre watching her through the window, his face expressing not only grief, but also fear. Her next stop was Maverick Johnson's house. The man met the detective at the door with red eyes from crying. "Well, did you find the killer?" he asked without preamble. "The investigation is ongoing. I need to tell you some more information about your niece." Zora had told her about Keisha's pregnancy. Maverick's reaction was explosive. "What?" He slammed his fist against the wall. "Who dared touch my girl? She was just a child. You didn't know about her condition?" "I didn't know anything. She was so quiet, so homey. No boys, no dates. At least that's what I thought." Maverick paced the room, his anger growing with every passing second. "I know who it could be," he said suddenly, stopping in front of the detective. "Who?" "That DeAndre Tallis, Latosha's husband. Keshia spent too much time at their house, and him. I always felt there was something wrong with him. Too friendly with young girls. Do you have any reason to suspect that?" Keshia had changed in the last few months. She became pensive, sometimes cried for no reason, and she started reacting strangely when I asked her how the Tallis family was doing. She gave evasive answers. Zora wrote down Maverick's words, realizing that his suspicions might not be unfounded. DeAndre's nervousness during the interrogation now took on a new meaning. Leaving Maverick's house, the detective was already making a plan for her next steps. She needed to take a closer look at the relationship between Keisha and the Tallis family, especially her interaction with DeAndre. The pregnancy of a 17-year-old girl turned the robbery case into something much more complicated and dark. The next morning, Detective Zora Kingsley arrived at the station with the firm intention of delving deeper into the details of Keisha Brown's life. The victim's broken phone had been sent to the county center's technical lab, and she was waiting for the results of the data recovery. In the meantime, she decided to study the phone records of the mobile operator. A request to the mobile phone company yielded the first interesting results. Over the past 3 months, Keisha had been actively texting and calling a number registered to DeAndre Talpis. The frequency of contact was striking, sometimes up to 15 messages a day, with calls late at night when the girl should have been at home. Zora carefully studied the printouts. The peak of activity was in July and August. Then the number of contacts dropped sharply in early September. The last messages were sent 2 days before the murder. A call from the technical lab interrupted her thoughts. "Detective Kingsley? We have the results from the victim's phone. The screen is broken, but we were able to recover almost all of the data." "Great. What do you have?" "The correspondence is quite explicit. There are numerous romantic messages from a contact named Dean. Judging by the number, this is the same DeAndre Tallis. Can you read a few examples? I miss you when you're at work. I can't wait to be with you again. You're the best man in the world." There are also more intimate messages that leave no doubt as to the nature of their relationship. Zora felt the puzzle starting to come together. Maverick Johnson's suspicions were well-founded. What about the latest messages? The tone changes. The girl writes things like, "I need to talk to you. This is important. Don't ignore me. I have news that will change everything." And in response, short phrases like, "Not now," and "We'll talk later." Send me a full printout of the correspondence. After receiving the documents, Zora carefully studied each message. A clear and unpleasant picture emerged. A 43-year-old married man had entered into a romantic relationship with his wife's 17-year-old relative. The correspondence began in May, when the tone of the messages was still relatively innocent, but by July it had turned into something openly intimate. The messages from the last few weeks were particularly revealing. Kesha was clearly trying to arrange a meeting with DeAndre, who was doing everything he could to avoid talking to her. In one of her last messages, she wrote, "I know you're scared, but we have to figure this out. I'm ready to do anything for us." Armed with this evidence, Zora went to Jimmy's auto repair shop, where DeAndre worked. The small workshop was located on the outskirts of town, in an industrial area. The smell of machine oil and the sound of tools at work greeted the detective at the entrance. DeAndre was working under the hood of an old pickup truck, his uniform even more stained than the day before. Seeing the detective, he straightened up abruptly, his face betraying his anxiety. "Detective Kingsley? Is something wrong?" "I need to talk to you in private. Is there somewhere we can talk quietly?" DeAndre looked around nervously. Other mechanics were working nearby, but the shop owner offered to let them use his office. "Mr. Tallis," Zora began when they were alone, "you said yesterday that you didn't have much contact with Keisha Brown." "Yes, that's true." "Then how do you explain this?" The detective placed printouts of phone records and text messages on the table. DeAndre glanced at the documents, his face first turning pale, then red. This isn't what you think. What do you think it is?" "She was a lonely girl. She lost her parents and lived with her uncle, who was always away on business. I was just supporting her." "Supporting her?" Zora read one of the more explicit messages. "This is your idea of supporting a 17-year-old girl?" DeAndre covered his face with his hands. "You don't understand. It just happened. I didn't plan it. She was so lonely, and I have problems with my wife. We've been drifting apart for a long time." "When did your relationship with Keisha start?" "In May. She was often home alone when Latosha was working the night shift. We talked. She told me about her plans, her dreams. She was so alive, full of hope." The detective watched the man closely. His defenses were crumbling one by one. "And you decided to take advantage of her trust?" "No, that's not true!" DeAndre raised his head sharply. "I didn't force her. She was the one who said she loved me. I tried to talk her out of it, to explain that it was impossible, but she was so insistent." "A 43-year-old man can't control his actions in a relationship with a 17-year-old girl? I know how it looks, but you don't know Keisha. She was mature beyond her years. She knew what she was doing." Zora moved on to the next stage of the interrogation. "Keisha was pregnant. Are you the father of the child?" DeAndre was silent for a long time, breathing heavily. "Yes," he finally said, barely audibly. "I'm the father." "When did you find out she was pregnant?" 3 weeks ago. She told me when we met in the park. I knew right away that things had gone too far. I told her we had to end our relationship." "How did she react?" "She cried and begged me not to leave her. She said we could be together, that she was willing to wait until I divorced Latosha. But I explained to her that it was impossible." The detective studied the printouts of messages from the last few weeks. Judging by the correspondence, she wasn't going to give up. Keisha was stubborn. She kept writing, calling, demanding to meet. I tried to avoid her, but she knew my schedule, came to the car repair shop, waited for me near the house. "What happened on the last evening of her life?" DeAndre paused, gathering his thoughts. "I came home around 8. Keisha was there, helping Latosha prepare dinner. She acted normal, like nothing had happened between us. After dinner, I went to my bedroom, saying I was tired. Then what? Around 11, she knocked on my bedroom door. She said she wanted to talk. Latosha was already asleep. We went to the kitchen. What did you talk about? She brought up our relationship again. She demanded that I make a decision about the baby. She said she couldn't hide her pregnancy anymore, that it would soon become obvious." "And what did you say?" "The same thing I had said before, that it was over between us, that she needed to think about what to do next, but without me." "How did she react to that?" "She started crying. She said she was going to go to Latosha and tell her the whole truth. She threatened to tell Uncle Maverick, too. I asked her not to rush into anything, to give me some time to think." "And that was the end of the conversation?" "Yes. She left the house around 11:30. She said she was going home, but wanted to take a walk and think things over first." Zora compared the testimony with the time of death. The time frames matched. "Was that the last time you saw her?" "Yes, I swear I didn't hurt her. Despite all the difficulties, I cared about her." The detective finished the interview and warned DeAndre that she might need to talk to him again. The man looked devastated, clearly weighed down by the consequences of his actions. The next step was to interview Keisha's classmates and friends. At the local school, Zora met with several girls from her class. The picture they painted added to the overall understanding of the victim's personality. Jasmine Wade, Keisha's friend, talked about the changes in the girl's behavior over the past few months. "She became kind of dreamy," Jasmine said. "She smiled all the time for no reason and spent a lot of time on her phone. She also started dressing differently and paying more attention to her appearance than usual." "Did she talk about a guy?" "Not directly, but it was clear that she had someone. She spoke in riddles about adult love and that age is just a number. We thought she was dating someone from her senior class." Another classmate, Shannon Carter, recalled a conversation with Keisha a week before her death. She was very excited, saying that everything in her life was about to change, that she had an important secret that she was going to tell everyone soon. She seemed happy, but at the same time tense. Did she mention what exactly she was planning to change? She said something about stopping hiding and showing everyone what real love is. We didn't understand what she was talking about. Teachers also noticed changes in Keisha's behavior. Her homeroom teacher, Miss Davis, said that the girl had become distracted in class and often lost in her thoughts. "She seemed troubled in recent weeks," the teacher recalled. "Several times I found her crying in the bathroom. When I asked her what was wrong, she said it was family problems." After gathering all the evidence, Detective Kingsley got a complete picture of the relationship between DeAndre and Keisha. The relationship began as emotional support for a lonely girl, but quickly developed into physical intimacy. The pregnancy was a turning point when DeAndre realized the seriousness of the situation and tried to break up with her. Kesha, on the other hand, was genuinely in love and had no intention of accepting the breakup. Her threats to tell his family the truth posed a serious problem for DeAndre, who stood to lose not only his wife, but also face criminal prosecution for having a relationship with a minor. The motive for murder was becoming increasingly clear. Detective Zora Kingsley decided it was time for an open conversation with the Tallis family. DeAndre's admission of his affair with Kesha changed the entire picture of the investigation, and she realized that further progress was impossible without complete honesty. That evening, she returned to the house on Oak Street. Latosha greeted the detective at the door with surprise. The woman looked tired after a day at the hospital, her cleaning uniform slightly rumpled. "Detective Kingsley? Anything new on the Kezia case?" "Yes, there's some important information we need to discuss. Is your husband home?" "DeAndre's in the garage, working on the car. Come in, I'll call him." They went into the living room, and Latosha called out to her husband. A few minutes later, DeAndre appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands with a rag. When he saw the detective, he visibly tensed up. "Please sit down," said Zora. "I need to talk to both of you." The couple sat down on the sofa next to each other. Latosha looked at the detective curiously, while DeAndre studied his hands. "During the investigation, new circumstances have come to light," Zora began. "Mr. Tallis, tell your wife about your relationship with Keisha." DeAndre raised his head sharply, his eyes filled with horror. What do you mean?" "Don't make me repeat what you've already admitted. Tell your wife the truth." Latosha looked from her husband to the detective in confusion. "What is she talking about, DeAndre? What relationship with Kesha?" An awkward silence fell. DeAndre clenched and unclenched his fists, gathering his courage. Finally, he spoke without looking up. "Latoya, I have something to tell you. Kesha and I were more than just relatives." "What do you mean?" "We had an affair for the last few months." Latoya's reaction was immediate. She recoiled from her husband as if he had hit her. "What?" Her voice broke into a scream. "Are you saying you slept with my 17-year-old cousin?" "Latosha, please hear me out." "Hear you out?" The woman jumped up from the couch. "Hear you out as my husband confesses to corrupting a child in my own home?" The detective watched the scene unfold, noting every reaction. Latosha's anger seemed genuine, but there were undertones that struck Zora as strange. She wasn't a child, DeAndre tried to justify himself. Kesha was a grown woman, she herself. "Shut up!" Latosha grabbed an ashtray from the coffee table and threw it at her husband. DeAndre dodged it, and the ashtray smashed against the wall. "How could you, in our house, while I was working to make ends meet?" "Mrs. Tallis, please calm down," the detective intervened. "Calm down? My husband was cheating on me with a teenager, and now she's dead. And you're asking me to calm down? Latosha began pacing the room, waving her arms. That's why she was always here. That's why she's been acting so strange these past few weeks. My God, how could I have been so blind? You didn't know anything? Zora asked. Nothing. I swear, nothing. I thought she was just helping around the house, that she liked our family atmosphere. And they... Latosha turned to her husband with hatred in her eyes. And they were doing this right under my nose. DeAndre sat with his head down, taking the barrage of accusations from his wife. There's something else, the detective added. Kesha was pregnant with your husband's child. If the previous revelation had been a blow, this was a knockout. Latosha froze, her face turning pale. Pregnant? With his child? Yes, Mr. Tallis has acknowledged paternity. Latosha slowly sank into a chair, as if her legs had given way beneath her. So all this time, while I was dreaming of having children of my own, while we were trying to conceive, he was having children with a 17-year-old girl. Latoya, I didn't want this to happen, DeAndre tried to explain. You didn't want it? Then how did it happen? Did she crawl into your bed herself? The detective decided to steer the conversation in the right direction. Mrs. Tallis, when was the last time you suspected that something was going on between your husband and Keisha? Never. Latosha wiped away her tears. I trusted them both. Keisha was like a little sister to me, and DeAndre. I thought he was an honest man. Did you notice any changes in their behavior? Strange looks, secret conversations? Latosha thought hard, trying to remember the last few months. Maybe. There were times when I felt tension, but I blamed it on DeAndre's fatigue, on his problems at work. And Kesha, yes, she became more withdrawn, but I thought it was just teenage stuff. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Zora heard heavy footsteps on the porch and a rough male voice. Open up, Tallis. I know you're home. It's Maverick, Latosha whispered. Keshia's uncle. The detective opened the door. Standing on the threshold was an enraged Maverick Johnson. His work clothes were dirty, his eyes red from rage and lack of sleep. Detective, I'm glad you're here, he said as he entered the house. I found out everything. The neighbors told me something interesting. Mr. Johnson, what are you talking about? Mrs. Robinson from next door saw Keisha leaving this house several times late at night, and she also saw that scumbag, he pointed at DeAndre, meeting with my niece in the park. Maverick stepped toward DeAndre, who tried to get up from the couch. So it's true? You really slept with my girl? Maverick, I can explain. Explain? Maverick grabbed DeAndre by the shirt and shook him. She was 17! She trusted you! Mr. Johnson, let him go, the detective ordered. But the man didn't listen. You killed her, didn't you? When she started asking for too much, you decided to get rid of her. No, I didn't kill Kesha, I swear. Zor had to physically intervene to separate the men. Maverick let go of DeAndre, but continued to stand threateningly in front of him. If not you, then who? Who else knew about your relationship? Mr. Johnson, please sit down. Let's discuss this calmly. Maverick reluctantly sank into a chair, but continued to glare at DeAndre. I knew there was something wrong with that guy. He was too friendly with young girls. And his wife, he looked at Latosha. Did you really not suspect anything? Nothing, Latosha replied quietly. I was blind and stupid. The detective took advantage of the pause to move on to the facts of the case. I want to go back to the circumstances of the murder. Upon closer examination of the crime scene, several important details came to light. Everyone present turned to her. Initially, we considered the theory of a robbery gone wrong, but the forensic experts found inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? Asked Maverick. Only small bills. About $20 were taken from Kesha's wallet. But her bank cards were left untouched. The gold earrings she was wearing were also left behind. What does that mean? Asked Latosha. A real robber would have taken all the valuables. Besides, judging by the evidence at the crime scene, the murder took place elsewhere, and the body was moved to the shed. DeAndre turned even paler. This indicates that the murder was planned and the robbery was staged to divert suspicion, the detective continued. So someone wanted to kill Keisha, Maverick concluded, and that someone knew about her condition. A heavy silence fell. Everyone understood where the investigation was leading. Mr. Tallis, Zora addressed DeAndre. "Where were you between 10 p.m. and midnight on the night of the murder?" "At home, asleep. Latosha can confirm that." "Mrs. Tallis?" Latosha hesitated. I went to bed early. I took a sleeping pill because I had a migraine. I don't know if DeAndre was home all night." "Latoya!" DeAndre exclaimed. "You know I didn't go out." "Do I know? After everything I've learned today, I don't believe anything anymore." Maverick stood up from his chair. "Enough with the drama. It's clear that he killed my girl. He was scared that the truth would come out, that he'd go to jail for having a relationship with a minor." "I had no reason to kill her," DeAndre defended himself. "No reason? What about the threat of exposure? The scandal that would have ruined your life?" The detective watched all the participants in this drama closely. Everyone had a motive. Everyone was hiding something. But she still didn't have enough direct evidence to charge anyone. "The investigation is ongoing," she said. "I ask that you all remain in town and be prepared for further questions." Leaving the Tallis house, Zora pondered what she had heard. The family drama was unfolding in all its ugliness, but the real killer was still in the shadows. She had to find the missing links in this chain of lies and betrayal. Detective Zora Kingsley spent the next 2 days painstakingly working on the evidence. Something about the Tallis family's history bothered her. There were too many contradictions, too many convenient coincidences. She decided to carefully analyze all the evidence she had gathered once again. On the morning of the 3rd day after the confrontation, Zora received a call from the forensic team. Charlie Warren reported additional findings at the crime scene. "Detective, we found something interesting in that shed. Fabric fibers caught on a nail near the entrance. Synthetic material similar to hospital staff uniforms." "Medical uniforms?" "Exactly. Blue, standard fabric used for hospital orderlies and cleaners." Zora remembered that Latosha had worked as a cleaner in a hospital. It could have been a coincidence, but there are no coincidences in a murder investigation. "Anything else?" "Yes. Car tire tracks near the shed. The pattern indicates an inexpensive model, often found on older cars. The print is clear. We'll be able to match it to a specific vehicle." "Great. Send all the materials to the station." Zora knew that the Tallis family had an old 1997 Honda Civic. If the tire tracks matched, it would be serious evidence. The next step was to check the surveillance cameras in the area. Springfield was a small town, but several stores and gas stations had video surveillance systems. The detective methodically went through all the locations, requesting recordings from the last week. A surprise awaited her at a hardware store on Main Street. The owner, an elderly Mr. Harris, willingly provided his camera recordings. "What exactly are you looking for, detective?" "Any purchases of rope, string, or similar items over the past week." They reviewed the footage from the 3 days before the murder. A familiar figure appeared on the screen. Latosha Tallis entered the store at 3:30 in the afternoon, headed for the hardware section, and bought a roll of clothesline. "Can you print out these frames?" Zora asked. "Of course. Does this woman have anything to do with the murder of that girl?" The detective did not answer the question, but inwardly, she felt the puzzle finally coming together. The purchase of rope 3 days before the murder could not have been a coincidence. Back at the station, Zora carefully examined all the evidence she had collected. The fibers from the medical uniform, the tire tracks, the video recording of the rope purchase. Everything pointed to Latosha Tallis. But she needed to understand the motive and reconstruct the sequence of events. She remembered Latosha's words about taking a sleeping pill for a migraine on the night of the murder. But what if that was a lie to cover up her absence from home? Zora decided to visit the hospital where Latosha worked. The head nurse, Mrs. Johnson, confirmed that Latosha had been off work on the night of the murder. "She asked for time off a week ago," the nurse recalled. "She said she needed to sort out some family issues." "Did she mention what kind of issues?" "No, but she seemed very tense the last few days. I even asked if she needed any help, but she refused." With this information, the detective knew she was ready for the final interrogation. She summoned Latosha to the station under the pretext of additional questions about the case. Latosha arrived the next morning. She looked tired and aged. as if the recent events had drained her of all her vitality. Settling into the interrogation room, the woman nervously fiddled with the strap of her handbag. "Mrs. Tallis, thank you for coming. I have a few questions about that night. I already told you everything. I went to bed early and took a sleeping pill. I checked your work schedule. You had the night off, which you requested in advance." Latosha flinched, but tried to remain calm. "Yes, I had the night off. So what? Why did you need time off? Did you have something special planned?" "I just wanted to relax. I've been working a lot lately." Zora placed photos from the surveillance camera on the table. "Do you recognize yourself?" Latosha glanced at the pictures and turned pale. The photos clearly showed her buying rope at a hardware store. It's not what you think." "What do you think it is? Why did you need rope 3 days before Keisha's murder?" "I wanted to hang a swing in the backyard for the neighborhood kids." "Where's this swing set, Mrs. Tallis?" The woman remained silent, realizing that her story didn't hold up. "We also have fabric fibers from the crime scene. They match the material of your work uniform. A lot of people wear uniforms like that. And tire tracks from your car near the shed where the body was found." Latosha covered her face with her hands. Her defenses were crumbling one by one. "Mrs. Tallis, when did you find out about your husband's affair with Kezia?" A long pause, then a quiet voice. "A week before she died." "How did you find out?" "I came home early from work. My shift was canceled. I heard voices in the bedroom and saw them together." Zora listened intently, writing down every word. "What did you do?" "Nothing. I left so they wouldn't notice me. I drove around town for hours, trying to make sense of what I had seen." "You didn't tell your husband what you knew?" "No, I wanted to think it through first, to figure out what to do next." "And then you found out about Kesha's pregnancy?" Latosha nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The next day I overheard them talking. She was telling him about the baby, begging him not to leave her, and he was trying to get rid of her." "And then you decided to intervene?" "I didn't plan to kill her. I just wanted to talk, to explain that she was destroying my family." The detective realized that the woman was ready to confess everything. "Tell me what happened that night." Latosha wiped away her tears and spoke more confidently. "I knew Keisha would come to our house. She always came when she wanted to talk to DeAndre. I waited for the right moment." "And you waited?" "Yes. After their conversation in the kitchen, she left the house upset. I followed her. I caught up with her near the park and asked her to talk." "Where did the conversation take place?" "We drove to an old farm in my car. It's quiet there. No one would disturb us. I wanted to explain to her that she was young, that she had her whole life ahead of her, and that DeAndre was a married man with responsibilities." "How did she react?" "She laughed." Latosha's voice was filled with rage. "She said I was old and ugly, that DeAndre had never really loved me, that now she had his child and he would choose her. And then you lost control?" "She said she would take my husband away from me and that there was nothing I could do about it. That in a few months, everyone would find out the truth, and I would have to accept it. Then I don't remember exactly what happened. I woke up when she was already dead." "You strangled her with the rope you bought beforehand?" "Yes. I carried it in my bag from the day I bought it. I don't know why, I just carried it around." "And then you moved the body to the shed and staged a robbery?" "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought that if it looked like a robbery, no one would look for a real motive." Latosha completely broke down, crying and confessing all the details of the crime. The detective concluded the interrogation and filed for an arrest warrant. An hour later, Latosha Tallis was taken to the county jail. She was charged with first-degree murder. News of the arrest quickly spread through the small town. DeAndre arrived at the station after his wife had already been taken away. He looked devastated, the realization that his infidelity had led to tragedy weighing heavily on him. "Can I see her?" he asked the detective. "Not yet. She needs a lawyer. Then visits will be arranged." "I didn't think she knew. If I had suspected, what would you have done?" DeAndre thought for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe I would have told her myself. Maybe I would have gotten a divorce. But I definitely wouldn't have let Keisha get hurt. It's too late to think about that now." Maverick Johnson arrived at the station that evening. Upon learning of Latosha's arrest, he looked both relieved and devastated. "So it wasn't her husband who killed her, but her wife," he said to the detective. "Yes, jealousy and despair drove her to commit the crime." "What will happen to Kesha now? When can I pick her up for the funeral?" "The body will be released tomorrow. The coroner has completed all the necessary procedures." Maverick nodded, his eyes filling with tears again. "I'll take her home to Georgia. Her parents are buried there. She'll be close to them." A week later, Springfield bid farewell to Kesha Brown. A small procession of cars made its way to the cemetery, where the 17-year-old girl found peace alongside her parents. DeAndre remained in the city alone. His wife was awaiting trial, accused of murder. His mistress was dead. The life he had known was completely destroyed. His neighbors shunned him. His co-workers avoided conversation. The house on Oak Street was empty and felt foreign to him. Detective Zora Kingsley closed the case, reflecting on human nature. Family secrets that should have remained hidden came to light in the most tragic way. Betrayal bred jealousy, jealousy led to murder, and murder destroyed several lives at once. In her final report, she wrote, "The murder of Kesha Brown was the result of a complex web of human passions and weaknesses. The crime was committed in the heat of the moment, but the planning of the cover-up indicates an attempt to avoid responsibility. Justice has been served, but the price was too high for everyone involved in this tragedy." Springfield gradually returned to its usual quiet life, but the story of the Tallis family will long serve as a reminder of how family secrets can lead to irreversible consequences.